You know that moment when you're about to post something online, and before you even hit the button, you've already imagined what 10 different people might think about it. Maybe you rewrite the caption 3 times. Maybe you delete the whole thing. Maybe you stare at it for 20 minutes wondering if it sounds weird, too confident, too emotional, too much. And the strange part is, most people probably wouldn't think twice about it, but your brain does. Because somewhere along the way, other people's opinions became louder than your own. And if you're being honest, this doesn't just happen online. It happens everywhere. You replay conversations after they end. You wonder if you talked too much. You wonder if you sounded stupid. You notice a slight change in someone's tone and spend the rest of the day trying to figure out what it meant. You walk away from perfectly normal interactions carrying questions nobody else is asking. Did I say the wrong thing? Did they misunderstand me? Do they still like me? And what's exhausting is that you know you're doing it. You know you're thinking about it more than everyone else. But knowing that doesn't make it stop, because this isn't really about overthinking. It's about something deeper. Psychology says human beings are naturally wired to care about what other people think. Thousands of years ago, belonging wasn't just important, it was survival. Being accepted by your group literally increased your chances of staying alive. Being rejected could mean danger. So your brain evolved to pay attention to social signals. The problem is that your brain doesn't always realize you're no longer living thousands of years ago. It still treats social approval like a life or death issue. And if you spent years feeling responsible for how other people see you, that system becomes even stronger. Think about how often you monitor yourself. Not just your actions, your entire presence. The way you speak, the way you laugh, the way you respond, the timing of your texts, the expression on your face, the words you choose. You're constantly running a second conversation in your head while the first conversation is still happening. Most people are focused on the interaction. You're focused on the interaction and your performance inside it. That's exhausting, because while everyone else is simply existing, you're evaluating, adjusting, editing, managing, and after a while it becomes automatic. You don't even notice you're doing it anymore. You just call it being careful. People who care too much what others think are often incredibly perceptive. You notice things. You pick up on subtle reactions. You read tone changes most people miss. You can walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional atmosphere. That sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's actually a strength. The problem is that you've pointed that strength towards yourself. Instead of observing the world, you're constantly observing how the world might be observing you. And those are very different things. Somewhere in your life, you probably learned that being liked mattered. Maybe criticism hit harder than it seemed to affect other people. Maybe approval felt rare. Maybe you grew up around people whose love felt conditional. When things went well, everything felt fine. When you disappointed them, everything felt different. And without realizing it, your brain learned a powerful lesson. Pay attention. Stay acceptable. Don't give people reasons to reject you. At first, that strategy feels useful. It helps you fit in. It helps you avoid conflict. It helps you earn approval. But eventually, it starts costing more than it gives. Because now every decision has an audience. Every opinion has a potential critic. Every action passes through a filter called "What will people think?" And that filter never rests. You've probably had moments where you wanted to do something, wear something, say something, start something, but then you imagined other people's reactions and suddenly your excitement disappeared. Not because the idea was bad, because you were mentally living through everyone's judgment before anything had even happened. That's one of the strangest things about caring too much what people think. Most of the suffering happens entirely in your imagination. You create a panel of judges that never actually existed, and then you spend your energy trying to satisfy them. The reality is that most people aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. Not because they don't care, because they're busy worrying about themselves. They're replaying their own conversations, analyzing their own mistakes, wondering what other people think of them. Everyone is starring in their own movie, but your brain keeps acting like you're starring in theirs. And here's where things become painful. The more you chase approval, the harder it becomes to know who you really are. Because eventually you stop asking yourself what you want. You start asking what will be accepted. You stop asking what feels authentic. You start asking what looks acceptable. And little by little, your personality becomes shaped by reaction instead of intention. Not dramatically, just gradually. You laugh at things you don't find funny. You agree with opinions you don't fully believe. You stay quiet when you want to speak. You become a version of yourself that's easier to approve of. And while that might earn acceptance, it often creates something else: resentment. Because deep down, part of you knows you're constantly negotiating with your own authenticity. The irony is that people who care too much what others think are often trying to avoid rejection, but the version of themselves that gets accepted isn't always the real version. So even when people like you, it can feel strangely unsatisfying, because there's always a voice in the back of your head saying, if they knew the real me, would they still feel the same? That's a lonely feeling, and it explains why external validation never seems to last very long. For a moment, you feel relieved. Someone compliments you, approves of you, likes what you did, and it feels good. But then the feeling fades, and your brain immediately starts looking for the next piece of reassurance. Because validation works like a painkiller. It relieves the discomfort temporarily, but it doesn't address the reason you needed it in the first place. This is where psychology gets really interesting. People who care too much what others think often believe they're being judged constantly, but what they're actually experiencing is self-judgment projected outward. In other words, you're often harsher on yourself than anyone else could ever be. You assume people are noticing your flaws because you're already focused on them. You assume people are criticizing you because you're already criticizing yourself. You assume people are disappointed because you're terrified of disappointing yourself. The outside world becomes a mirror reflecting fears that already existed inside. And once you realize that, something starts changing. Because now the question isn't, how do I stop caring what people think? That's impossible. You're human. Humans care. The real question is, why do other people's opinions feel more important than my own? That's where the answer usually lives. Because confidence isn't reaching a point where criticism never hurts. Confidence is reaching a point where criticism doesn't decide who you are, where someone can misunderstand you without destroying your peace, where someone can dislike you without rewriting your identity, where approval becomes nice instead of necessary. And that's a completely different way of living. It doesn't happen overnight. Usually it starts with small moments, speaking honestly when staying quiet would be easier, making decisions based on values instead of reactions, allowing yourself to disappoint people occasionally. Not because you're selfish, because you're human. Because no matter how carefully you live, someone will misunderstand you. Someone will disagree with you. Someone won't like you. And trying to prevent that from happening is like trying to stop the weather. It costs enormous energy and changes nothing. Maybe that's the deeper psychology here. You care so much about what people think because connection matters deeply to you. You want to be understood, accepted, valued. There's nothing wrong with that. The challenge is remembering that your worth cannot be handed to you by the same people who can take their approval away tomorrow. At some point, your own opinion has to become part of the conversation. Not louder than everyone else's, just loud enough to be finally heard. Because the moment you stop building your identity around other people's reactions, something unexpected happens. You start feeling lighter. Not because everyone approves of you, because you no longer need them to. If you enjoy understanding human behavior, subscribe. And honestly, what's one thing you've wanted to do for a long time but kept avoiding because of what other people might think?